Okay, let's dive into this. We're talking about an absolute icon, a legend, but the story of how he got there, it's even more epic.
So the scene is set. It's Candlestick Park, January 10th, 1982. It's the NFC Championship, and they're up against America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. The whole dynasty is on the line, bro.
And it's not looking good. They're down by 6 with less than 5 minutes to go. Everything is going wrong. It looks like it's over.
To make things worse, they're backed up on their own 8-yard line. They need to go 92 yards to the end zone. That's basically impossible.
But then, Joe Cool goes to work. A scramble, a leap, a fingertip grab. A moment that's literally frozen in time. It didn't just win a game, it launched a dynasty. But how did this guy even get here?
People always ask about that catch, but that moment, it started a long, long way from San Francisco. It started back home.
You know, I grew up in steel country. My dad, Joe Sr., he'd come home from the mill, and I'd just be waiting at the door with a ball. It's really all I ever wanted to do.
See, even back then, people knew. He was the comeback kid from the jump. So obviously Notre Dame comes calling, and it's straight to the top, right?
Not exactly. When I got to South Bend, I was 7th on the depth chart. 7th string. I remember wondering if I was even ready for a place like that.
But you can't keep a legend on the bench. He fights his way up, leading these absolutely insane comebacks.
The Cotton Bowl in '79 was something else. I was freezing, nearly hypothermic. They gave me some chicken soup at halftime. I guess it warmed me up just enough to go back out there.
And this just illustrates the point. He's a national champion, a legend in the making, first-round pick, no question.
The pro scouts, well, they weren't so sure. They had their reports, and they had their doubts. Are you kidding me? They're looking at the measurables, not the man. So the crucial point is, he waits.
I watched 3 other quarterbacks get picked before my name was called, into the 3rd round, 82nd overall.
But one guy saw what all the others missed. An absolute genius. Bill Walsh.
Coach Walsh, he had this system, what people now call the West Coast offense. It wasn't about throwing the ball a mile. It was all about rhythm and timing and accuracy. It fit what I did best.
And the rest is history, bro. The overlooked kid from steel country, the 7th stringer, the 82nd pick, finds the perfect home.
Everything that came before, all of it, it led me there. And San Francisco, that was a game changer.
From the bench to the GOAT, that's how you own the field. Absolutely epic.
You hear the name Joe Montana, and what do you think of, right? Late game heroics, these impossible comebacks, 4 Super Bowl rings. For a whole generation of fans, he was winning. But the story of the man they called Joe Cool, well, it's way more complicated than just a bunch of trophies and highlight reels. It's a story about the real, and I mean a real price of becoming a legend, and what happens after the cheering finally fades. So let's get into it, the man behind the myth.
And we're gonna start right here, with this quote from Steve Young. Yeah, the guy who would eventually take his job. This one single idea, this relentless, nagging drive to add just one more chapter, one more win, that is the beating heart of Joe Montana's entire story. It's what made him great, and honestly, it's what makes his journey so fascinating.
So where did this whole legend of Joe Cool even come from? Well, it wasn't born under the bright lights of the NFL. Nope, it was forged way back in the tough, gritty steel towns of Western Pennsylvania, a place that's famous for cranking out legendary quarterbacks. And that nickname, that wasn't some clever marketing slogan somebody cooked up. Oh no, it was earned. It was earned in the fire. Back at Notre Dame, he got this reputation for these insane comebacks. The most famous one has to be the 1979 Cotton Bowl. The guy is literally battling hypothermia. They're feeding him chicken soup in the locker room to warm him up. And what does he do? He goes back on the field and leads this miraculous last-second victory. That was Joe Cool in a nutshell. But here's the crazy part. Despite all those college heroics, the NFL scouts, they just weren't sold. They looked at him and saw a guy who was, too skinny, who didn't have a rocket for an arm, whose mechanics were just average. And because of all that doubt, he slipped. He slid all the way to the 3rd round of the 1979 NFL draft. That's where the San Francisco 49ers finally decided, let's take a chance on him. And let me tell you, for the 49ers, that chance paid off bigger than they could have ever imagined. In San Francisco, Montana teams up with this offensive genius, Coach Bill Walsh. And together, man,
They didn't just win, they basically rewrote the book. They brought in the West Coast offense, this whole new system of short, precise passes. And it didn't just change the team, it changed the entire game of football forever. They built a true dynasty. I mean, the results, they kind of speak for themselves, don't they? 4 Super Bowl rings in 9 seasons? It was unbelievable. The 49ers were the team of the 1980s, no question about it. And right there, in the center of that whole storm, was their calm, cool leader, Joe Montana. His time in San Francisco is just loaded with these moments that are burned into the memory of every football fan. But if you have to pick one moment that stands above them all, it has to be the catch. That last-second, game-winning touchdown to Dwight Clark in the '82 NFC Championship game. That pass didn't just win them the name. It launched the whole dynasty. But empires fall, dynasties end. And for Joe Montana, the end of his time in San Francisco was anything but the fairy tale ending that he and pretty much every fan had always dreamed of. You know, it's a question every great athlete has to face eventually. What happens when the game you completely dominated starts to move on without you? For Montana, the answer was brutal. It came in the form of devastating injuries and the undeniable rise of a younger, super talented challenger, just waiting for his shot. The end really came in stages. It wasn't just one thing. First, there was this back injury in '86 that was so severe, doctors were literally telling him to just hang it up, retire. Then a brutal hit in the 1990 NFC title game that put him on the shelf for almost 2 full seasons. And while he was gone, his incredibly talented backup, Steve Young, was proving that he was the future of the franchise. Man, this quote from Montana himself just reveals so much of the pain he felt. You can just hear it. He felt like he was being shoved out the door, that the team he had poured his heart and soul into building was just moving on. For a guy who saw his teammates as family, this must have felt like a massive betrayal. And this whole situation created this huge divide. From the 49ers side of things, look, it was a business decision. A tough one, but a necessary one, to move on to a younger star and secure the team's future. But from Montana's perspective, he felt like he was being totally isolated, exiles from the only pro home he'd ever known. And then, it was official. The unthinkable happened. The trade sent an absolute shockwave across the entire league. Joe Montana, the face of the 49ers, was going to be a Kansas City Chief. An era wasn't just over, it felt like it had been ripped away. Now, Montana went on to lead the Chiefs to the AFC Championship game, proving to everyone he could still play at an elite level. But those final years and that whole decade of dominance before them, it all came at a staggering physical cost. Just look at this. This is the body's scorecard. And honestly, this is just a partial list of what he lives with today. He's had over 20 surgeries since he played his last game. That cool, calm demeanor on the field, it hit a warrior who was just absorbing unbelievable punishment year after year after year. And this simple admission, it's just heartbreaking. This is the stark reality behind all the rings and the highlights. The man who was once one of the most mobile, elusive quarterbacks in the game now lives with constant pain and real physical limitations. So, where do you go from there? I mean, how does a legend who feels like he got pushed out of the game he loves, left with a body that feels like it betrayed him, how do you find a new way to win? Well, he found a new arena, and it was probably the last place anyone expected. Silicon Valley. Montana co-founded a venture capital firm, and get this, its very first fund had an incredible 21 unicorns. That's what they call companies valued at over $1 billion. He proved his eye for picking winners went way beyond the football field. This insight from his wife, Jennifer, it really tells you everything you need to know about his character. Even after 4 Super Bowls, all the success, what still drives him is that same underdog mentality he had when scouts called him too skinny. He thrives on being doubted. He just needs something new to prove. But for all the success in business, his greatest victory today might be something else entirely. After years and years of being defined by football, he's found a new identity and a new kind of peace in just being a father and now a grandfather. His grandkids call him Yogi, and from everything you hear, it's the best job he's ever had. So, in the end, the story of Joe Montana is really a tale of 2 halves. You've got the myth, the flawless, unshakable winner. And then you have the man, complex, resilient, wounded, but a person who found a totally new way to define what happiness means. Which kind of brings us to our final question. Is a legacy really measured in rings and records, or is it found in the ability to endure unimaginable pain, to adapt when your entire world gets turned upside down, and to find real contentment long after the roar of the crowd is faded away? For Joe Montana, it seems like the answer is all of the above.
All right, let's talk about what happens when a king is told his reign is over. You know, when a living legend gets treated like a ghost in his own castle. This isn't just some story about the end of a football career. Nah, this is the story of a champion literally fighting his way out of the grave they tried to put him in.
I mean, just listen to those words. That's what Joe Montana said about the end of his time in San Francisco. He didn't say it was sad or it was time to move on. He said he felt like he was being buried alive. That's a brutal, brutal image. And honestly, it's the key to this whole story.
So to really get the fall, you've got to remember just how high he was flying. It's 1990, Montana's just won back-to-back Super Bowls. He's leading the 49ers to this insane 14-2 record, and everybody, I mean everybody, is thinking three-peat. He is, without a doubt, the greatest quarterback to ever play the game, period. And then, the 1990 NFC Championship game against the Giants. He rolls out, he dodges Lawrence Taylor, and then, bam! Leonard Marshall just crushes him from behind. And the hit, it was catastrophic. We're talking a broken hand, cracked ribs, a bruised sternum, a bad concussion. In one single violent moment, the entire dynasty just grinds to a halt.
From the absolute top of the world to the sideline, just like that. That one hit, it cost him the entire 1991 season. Get this, he'd only play one single half of football in all of 1992. 2 years, poof, gone. For a quarterback in his mid-30s, man, that is an eternity. The mental part, that was the hardest at first. It's just gone, cold turkey. Then the physical pain really starts to settle in. And that rehab, that was a very, very lonely time.
And here's the thing. While Montana was fighting tooth and nail just to get back on the field, the future was kind of moving on without him. His backup, Steve Young, who was a great player in his own right, he'd taken the reins, and he played really well. So when Joe was finally healthy, he finds himself in the most bizarre, awkward spot you can imagine. The legend, the 4-time champ, was now the backup quarterback.
So the 49ers, they're stuck with this impossible choice, right? Do you stick with the icon, the guy who literally built your empire? Or do you turn the page to the younger, more athletic guy who represents the future? For the team, the decision was just brutal business. But for Joe, it was deeply, deeply personal. And that's what fed the beast. The coach, George Seifert, he banned me from the facility when the team was there. So I had to do my rehab all alone. I even took up flying lessons. And every day I'd fly my plane over the stadium and I'd look down and see my team playing without me.
My teammates, they were my family. We were all so close. So to be pushed out of that circle, yeah, that was a hurt that never really truly healed. And then came the final blow. On April 20th, 1993, the unthinkable actually happened. The San Francisco 49ers traded Joe Montana to the Kansas City Chiefs. The face of the franchise was exiled.
To this day, I still struggle to understand how it all went down. I really believe I should have never had to leave. We could have won 2, maybe 3 more rings together. It shouldn't have ended that way.
Okay, but this is where the story turns. This isn't a tragedy, people. This is a revenge tour. Montana lands in Kansas City, a team that was desperate for a winner, a city that was ready to embrace a legend. And he had a new mission: prove to San Francisco and to the entire world that the king was not dead. And did he prove it? Oh yeah, immediately. In his very first season, he leads the Chiefs to their first division title in over 2 decades. The Montana Magic was back. He was still Joe Cool. It was pure motivation. I had a whole city that wanted me, that just embraced me from day one. I wanted to show everybody I could still compete, that I could still win. And, well, we did.
And man, those playoffs were just an epic run. A huge comeback win in overtime against the Steelers. Another comeback on the road against the Oilers. He dragged them all the way to the AFC Championship game, just one single win away from another Super Bowl. But in that final game against Buffalo, he took another brutal hit, another concussion. And just like that, the ride was over.
After one more solid season, Montana finally retired in 1995. But the game, it never really leaves you. He paid for that glory. For every single one of those rings, he paid for it with his body. Just
Just look at this list, it is staggering. 3 neck fusions, chronic knee pain so bad it needs to be replaced, arthritis in his hands, a damaged eye from head trauma, numbness from sciatic nerve damage that he's had since 1986, and over 24 surgeries after he retired. That, right there, is the real price of being Joe Montana. I can't play basketball, can't ski anymore, I can't really run much these days, but, well, that's the price you pay to play the game. But the physical toll, that wasn't the only cost to his legacy. In the years after he retired, while he was trying to put his body back together, a new challenger to his throne emerged.
And yep, you know who we're talking about. That is, of course, the number of rings won by Tom Brady, the kid who used to sit in the stands at Candlestick Park watching Montana play, the kid who grew up to not just match but actually surpass his hero's championship record, and in doing so, he completely rewrote the GOAT debate forever.
So what do you do? What do you do when the cheering finally stops? Your body aches all the time, and your crown has been taken. Well, if you're Joe Montana, you find a new game to win. And for him, that search led him to the most unlikely place you can imagine, Silicon Valley.
He co-founded a venture capital firm, Liquid 2 Ventures. And it turns out the same skills that made him a legend on the field, reading the defense, trusting your gut, finding the right team, made him an absolute killer investor. His first fund has over 20 unicorns. That's startups valued at over $1 billion. Joe Cool found a whole new way to win.
But in the end, this story doesn't get resolved in a boardroom or in some sports bar GOAT debate. It resolves itself at home. His true victory, the one that really defines this final chapter of his life, wasn't about another ring or another billion-dollar investment. His wife, Jennifer, she put it best. She said, "You've got a family that loves you, you've got money in the bank, what could you really want for?" And that right there, that completely shifts the definition of success away from public glory and toward private contentment. I have a deep, deep regret about how much the game took me away from my kids when they were growing up. But now, being a grandparent, they call me Yogi. It's just the best thing. To see my son be a father, to hold my family's future in my arms, that's a whole different kind of win.
So it all kind of leaves us with this question. How do we really measure a legend? Is it by the trophies they stack up on a shelf? Or is it by the quiet moments of peace they find after the fight is all over? For Joe Montana, the man who felt like he was being buried alive, the greatest comeback wasn't on a football field. It was finding a way to climb out of that grave and finally truly live.